Mr. Laliberté, could you please play an accordion?
No, I'm not playing accordion. Is he crazy? That one? These guys want me to play accordion for the past 2-3 months. What is that? I don't know. You have to find my accordion. But it's a beautiful one. Go on, Max.
I'm tired.
It's a Russian instrument.
This is the spacecraft Soyuz TMA-16 crew. Cosmonauts are getting ready for the flight to the International Space Station. For the first time ever, there is a professional clown among the crew members, Guy Laliberté.
Just missing a note here.
At 14, he ran away from home. Then he was just roaming around the world for 11 years. At 25, he founded his own circus. Nowadays, he is the owner of a circus empire and a billionaire. Guy is the 7th Earthling who bought a trip to the orbit. Observing the parachute, descent in standard mode. Brake engines are worked in standard mode. Ground contact is on, landing is completed. The first one to be pulled out of the spacecraft is traditionally the crew commander, later on the flight engineer, and only then the space tourist. Guy Laliberté steps onto the scene already wearing a clown nose. He seems to be taking a bow. Victory. The most challenging circus number of his whole lifetime is now over. Allez up in front of the camera. I would like Guy Laliberté to say a few words in Russian. He promised to learn several Russian words during a couple of days. He'll be training to the limit. He'd better try harder, otherwise we shall consider whether to send him back to Earth or not. For the first half an hour, right after the landing, he keeps silent. 10 days locked in space must be definitely striking emotional experience, even for the world-famous clown. Now one needs to regain consciousness and realize that you are back on Earth, the weightlessness is finally over, and that body has required its normal weight. Bear in mind that spaceflight managers' jokes are nothing more than jokes. What a pity, though. Several hours later, the first ever space clown would say, "I'm still soaring in clouds." And a little later he would admit, the most amazing sensation is the smell of fresh grass once the hatch was opened.
Space, it was floating, now I have to take care of things.
A burst of applause. Mascara. The improvisation has paid off well. First and foremost, due to having been thoroughly planned in advance. Emergency. Fire on board the ISS. As a result of a short circuit, electric wiring is set on fire. Inflammation is spreading instantly. Emergency situation mode is on. The fire signal went off, smoke all around. Luckily, it's a fire drill. Canadian billionaire Guy Laliberté faces a rather challenging task. In less than 4 months, he has to master a new profession, since a clown should become a proper spaceman. The crew to set about the station abandoned procedure. This walk with gas masks on may seem odd only to a random spectator. As a matter of fact, it's been absolutely strictly calculated. Walking from one particular training room to another precisely corresponds in its energy expenses to the efforts to be applied by cosmonauts for an immediate evacuation in the orbit. Reach the rescue module, put on the spacesuits, undock from the station and fly away. Back to Earth. Moreover, it's a supplementary endurance test. Working for 3 hours in this mode, cosmonauts usually lose up to 5 kilos. It's hard even for top professionals. Guy Laliberté has to feel double pressure due to the fact that it's his first joint training with the crew. Furthermore, flight engineer Jeffrey Williams, an American astronaut, was initially against space tourism itself, and Guy is perfectly aware of that. NASA astronauts' discontent echoes an international scandal that happened to take place in the United States during the first space tourist flight preparation. It would start unraveling in Houston. On March 19, 2001, the Russian spaceship crew was conveyed there to work on the ISS American Segment Simulator. At the U.S. Mission Control Center, as well as in American court, filming is strictly prohibited. The reason why everything that took place then reached us by means of submitted drawings and witnesses' recollections exclusively. On March 19, 2001, it was announced to the Russian cosmonauts that NASA Administrator Daniel Goldin had ordered to replace the third crew member. Instead of an American citizen, a millionaire, but above all, the first ever space tourist Dennis Tito, they must step aboard a professional astronaut. There was a grave hitch. Everyone lapsed into silence. At last I asked if it was NASA leader's final decision. Afterwards, conversations were both in English and Russian, but a compromise would never be found. The NASA management was deeply opposed to an amateur's flight. Thus, the decision on a crew complement alteration would be made notwithstanding Moscow's preferences and without a single endorsement. In those circumstances, the Russian space team commander proposed the only correct solution. Crew, stand up and leave the room after me. Although Dennis Tito hardly understood a word of Russian, he saw us rise and walk out, so he jumped up and ran away past us, purely instinctively. It was the very start of the enormous international confrontation between NASA and Roscosmos. Initially, Americans did not mind space tourism. In the mid-70s, President Reagan even invented a marvelous show supposing to send a schoolteacher into the orbit so that she could give a lesson from space. A rather fine idea ended in a real tragedy. January 26, 1986 is a dark date in the U.S. space exploration chronicles. The Space Shuttle Challengers lift off. 6 astronauts and primary school teacher Krista McAuliffe aboard. For the first time in history, she was meant to give 2 lessons from the orbit addressing entire humankind. Krista's whole class would be present at the launch pad on that day to see their beloved teacher fly up into space. But on the 73rd second of the flight, somebody at the observation point would scream in horror, "Oh my goodness, what's wrong with Challenger?" The space shuttle exploded and tumbled into several fragments. All the crew members died. After this accident, the U.S. Congress resolved not to let unqualified subjects participate in space flights due to the high incidence of risk and the wide public implications arising in such cases. This is the reason why the Russian part's intention to send Dennis Tito to the ISS bumped into such an active counteraction of NASA. Besides, the USA was not going to yield the Pioneer's palm to Russia. The NASA management was conscious that they are missing another chance to be the first. So they did everything what it took to prevent our spaceflight. Consequently, it was the continuation of an old-time space race. But in case of Dennis Tito, Americans could hardly complain about the Russians. The flight was supposed to be carried out by the Russian spacecraft Soyuz. Spaceship's crew was appointed in Russia. On the ISS, Russia is as an equal partner as the USA. Besides, space speaks Russian after all. Mr. La Liberté, could you please read this text? And what is it? A Russian song, I guess? Yes, that's the Russian space chanson.
Zemlya, Zemlya, huh? Zemlya wow, Illuminator, yeah, Il loue Manatore. Oui, 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 oui.
Welcome to the Russian cosmonauts group. Russian language seems to be the hardest subject in Space Tourist Preparatory Program. But Canadian billionaire Guy Laliberté is twice puzzled thereby. At 14, he abandoned school and later on never tackled any studies.
C'est bon?
Frankly, I find it difficult to write even in French, my native language. I'd rather swallow fire instead. Guy Laliberté still plays with fire. His school of life was that of a street artist. Plain and rough street laws. Every day one had to earn his living. So did Guy by entertaining passers-by with his accordion, stilts tricks and fire swallowing.
I would say the only things that I've been missing maybe compared to the time I was a street performer is that sense of liberty that permit you a morning when you wake up to decide to go east, west, side, north, up, left, right.
Nowadays, Guy Laliberté is one of the most famous modern artists. He has a big family. He was twice married and both times happily. He became the father of 6 children altogether. As for the wives, history is silent, but Guy adores his heirs.
But most important, I made a point in my life that every day I wake up, I have one goal in my day. It's to make laugh my kid at least once every day of my life.
And how do you usually succeed in it?
Any type of thing, I just told you. It's just like at the breakfast, I would put the egg on my head and crash it. And
These days, Guy the Free, that's how one could translate his French surname, celebrates his 50th birthday. But he's not going to rest in content with what's been already achieved.
Il faudrait que j'aille une amoureuse russe, une copine, une femme russe pour parler mieux russe.
I've got to fall in love with a Russian girl, then it would be easier to learn Russian, Guy says.